next session is with my colleague, our analytics trainer and coach. I don't think I've seen anyone in the industry with so much passion about Google Analytics as Eric. So he'll be here to talk a little bit about Google Tag Manager. So when we planned the content for the conference, we mixed it up a little bit. There's some product presentation on the product, some technical presentations, and also some case studies. So this session will be a little more on the technical side. So if you're a marketer, we don't want you to fall asleep. So make note of what can be done and how less dependent on IT you can be. So I want to welcome Eric Fettman, our analytics coach and trainer, as well as our friend and industry star, Stefan in the back. Stefan Hamill, please come up here. Stefan is a very good friend, known him for a lot of years. Learned a lot from him. Actually, he's done a lot. He used to be on the board of the DAA. You've seen him on probably some podcasts, as well as he has the self-assessment tool that is getting a new version next week.
Nice.
Okay, so I'll put it on the spot. So two very intelligent, very knowledgeable people will take this next session.
Okay, thank you, Ferris. I'm very, very happy to have Stefan with us today. We're actually, you may have seen in one of the emails that we sent out that we were scheduled to have Lucas Bergstrom, who's the product manager of Google Tag Manager, join us today. He had a last-minute emergency commitment, so he sends his apologies, but it is a truly great pleasure to have Stefan. We didn't know if he was going to be able to join. Stefan is a world authority on Google Analytics, Google Tag Manager, so.
Now you're saying it, the pressure is on me, right?
Well, when any mess ups are I'm going to feel to you, so. But we'll go ahead and get started with the presentation. Now, what you may not know about my history at Enor is when I started, I asked Verizon Shares if I could be on the design team. And they said, well, maybe you better teach Google Analytics instead. We're going to talk more about these two concepts that are illustrated here. A container in Tag Manager is fundamental, and a piece of script that you put inside of a container in the form of a tag, another fundamental concept. JavaScript tags. As analysts, as marketers, we need to put many different types of scripts onto our websites. And these blocks of scripts are referred to as tags in many instances. So all of these types of functionalities that we need for different analytics and marketing purposes, pretty much everything is driven by page tagging. It's driven by chunks of JavaScript that you have to deploy to your site. And you already might be seeing from this plethora of different types of tags that there can be an inherent management problem. And the management problem is that when you start including all of these scripts on your pages, it can easily become a mess. For those of us who worked on the implementation end, who's ever put a piece of JavaScript onto a page and completely forgotten about it? Oh, come on, a few of us. I certainly have more than once. Okay, now just to get an idea of all the different types of tags that are run on different websites, you can install the Ghostery Chrome extension. And let's actually just go to a website. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and enable Ghostery. So extensions. There we go. Now we just need to go to a website. Where do you want to go, Stefan?
CNN.com.
Okay, let's see how many
tags.
How many tags CNN is
Anyone
on.
working for CNN? No? Okay. Okay.
And you go to dismiss, okay? Let's see what Ghostery is giving us on CNN.
You're already up at. Already 25.
Still loading.
Where are you seeing this? That's what it's
Right in the toolbar at the top, you see the little blue ghost with 25.
Oh, there we go. Okay. Let's try reloading the page, because usually when you load Ghostery, you see all the different tags kind of shoot up the side. There we go.
Yeah.
So you see all the different tags that are running on CNN.
39. Counting.
And that's, you may not be dealing with 39 tags, but certainly it's normal to have 5 or 10 or 15 tags within any organization of any size. So therein lies the issue. And by the way, for the Google folks, this is a Google presentation, and I work in Google Presenter much more than I work in PowerPoint. Just wanted to note that. Okay, now normally to get scripts onto pages, in a lot of cases, you have to deal with kind of passive-aggressive looking developers like the one here. Okay, so the main concept in a tag management system is that you install a container, you install one piece of code onto your pages, propagate it out through all the pages. It's usually a very simple procedure because you can install it into a page template. We're going through a lot of these concepts very quickly in my training, certainly in Stefan's training. We devote a discussion to all of these ideas, installing the template, so forth. We're going through rapid fire, but you install the container code onto all pages of your site, and you really can't think of it like a metaphorical container. It's a container in which you as the marketer, you on the business end, have control of the marketing and analytics codes that get deployed to your site. So you're doing your developers a favor, you're doing yourself a favor, because you as the marketers, the analysts, the business people, the product people, potentially, are the ones who are directly controlling what gets deployed to help you perform your function. Here's another representation of a container. Scripting on the page, and you have an area where you can add your own tagging. Okay, let's review some basic terminology, and we're going to see some of this in action. So we have a container, we have tags that we put into a container. We have triggers, formerly called rules. We're going to look at the new version of Google Tag Manager. In Google Tag Manager version 2, rules are called triggers, and macros are called variables. We're going to look at macros a little bit more of an advanced topic, how to get variable data off of your pages, and we're also going to look at another somewhat advanced topic, which is the data layer. And the data layer is the object that allows you to store data in the page, and from which you can pull into your tags. So these are the 5 main areas that we want to think about in Tag Manager. 5 main concepts. Independence from developers, and going over some of the benefits. Easier management of tags. It's called the tag management system because at a basic level, it just allows you to keep track of what you've put onto your site. That's one of the very basic benefits of a tag management system. Rule-based. We're going to look at the importance of having a rule-based system, because rule-based system is going to allow the tags to be extendable. If you have 1 or 100 or 1,000 of a certain type of, let's say, PDF that you're downloading, or any PDF that is downloadable from your site, one tag and one set of triggers will serve all of those tagging purposes. Repeatability. And repeatability is going to be an important concept because the repeatability is also going to guarantee that data is fed into Google Analytics. In this case, you don't have to use Google Tag Manager and Google Analytics. It's important to recognize that they're independent systems. Google Tag Manager is another way to deploy Google Analytics to your site. You can use Google Tag Manager for everything under the sun but Google Analytics, but obviously in our universe, we all use Google Analytics, but they are independent systems. But A benefit that we're going to get from Google Tag Manager is that our data is going to be input consistently into Google Analytics. Our event data, in this example, will be input in a consistent way, so we're going to get a nice hierarchy. When we look at event categories, event actions, event labels, we're going to have nice consistency, nice hierarchy. Okay, so we went over these tags. Stefan, before we move on to the implementation, and anything else we should add about Tag Manager?
How many of you are already using GTM? Good. Version 1, I guess? Anyone already started using version 2? Okay.
Okay. A lot of us are just getting started in version 2. We'll take a look. It's not hard to get used to. If you haven't started using it, there are several reasons to like it. Okay. Let's look at a Google Analytics case study within Google Tag Manager. This session was about Google Analytics and Google Tag Manager best practices. So, as we know, in Google Analytics, most of our data is page view data, and most of that data comes in through the deployment of the tracking code that's provided in the Google Analytics admin, or the equivalent in Google Tag Manager, which is just a page view tag, a universal analytics track type page view deployed through Google Tag Manager. So that's the good news. It's very easy to capture most of your Google Analytics data just through a basic tag, whether that's deployed natively, or whether that's deployed through Google Tag Manager. A page view is one type of hit, and it's important that we review the concept of a hit, because every time a page loads, that tracking code that we just saw doesn't just send data about the page. It does send the page title, and it does send the page URL, but it sends a lot of other information as well. Information about the technology that the visitor is using, geographic information, source information. Although source information is problematic out of the box, which is why we need campaign tagging. That's a whole other discussion that we could have that we won't do right now. But a lot of other data gets sent into Google Analytics with the basic page view tagging. So that is the good news. That's the happy news. By the way, if you want to see this on your own site or anyone else's site, Google Analytics, any site that you have access to in Google Analytics. Oh, actually, it's any site that's running GA. The Google Analytics, the GA debug Chrome extension, you can install that, and you can see hit data in Chrome. GA debug for Chrome. Okay, the sad news is that there are many, many types of important actions that you need for analytics that are not captured by default because they do not cause a page view. And as Google Analytics practitioners, we all should understand that out of the box, a click does not get recorded in any way. Out of the box, it's only the result of a click, which is a page load. It can be a page load on your own site that you're tracking. That's what generates the data by default. None of these scenarios will generate data by default in Google Analytics. There are many scenarios in here. In training, we always emphasize this. I think the record, and we have 3 of our folks from Blue Shield of California, when I was doing training with them, we came up with 17 different scenarios. I took a picture of it on my iPhone. 17 different scenarios that are important for you to understand as an analyst that are not tracked by default. So that's a little bit of sad news, but it's not really sad, of course.
You know what, I would also add, one of the comments I've seen a couple of times is people saying, I've deployed Google Tag Manager, but I don't see any data in GA. Well, that's because Google Tag Manager on its own, it's just an empty box. It doesn't do anything. Until you actually add the tags and the rules and the conditions under which you want the tags to fire. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. And then you have to remember to publish the container once you put the tag in. So there are a lot of gotchas. Okay, what we want to do is we want to generate event data in Google Analytics by explicitly sending events on click actions. So we're going to want to populate the events reports. They're dedicated reports, separate from the pages report. We could populate virtual page views as well into the pages report, similarly to the way we're tracking events. If you're tracking the download, say, of a PDF, you could track that as a virtual page view or an event, but the mechanics are the same. The decision is up to you. Okay. Now, event tracking for individual links. Excuse the curly quotes and the curly apostrophes, but if you were to link from your site to the Google Analytics blog, on top, that's what the link looks like without any event tracking, and the piece of HTML below is the same link with event tracking going into Google Analytics on the on-click event. Now, if you're looking at this and it looks like a little bit of a pain in the neck, especially if you have to do it 10 or 20 or 100 times, you're right. So this is not the ideal approach. Conceptually, this is what's going on, but it's not the ideal approach.
Don't do that anymore.
Yeah, we don't have to do that. Okay, so we talked about rule-based repeatability and we talked about consistency in Tag Manager. Let's go ahead and look at two solutions for deploying event tracking for Google Analytics through Google Tag Manager. So we're going to look at one scenario which is a little bit simpler, and then we're going to look at another scenario which is a little bit more complex that takes advantage of the data lake. Okay. Google Tag Manager. If you go to google.com/tag manager, you still see the old interface. If we go to the secret subdomain, not secret really, but Tag Manager, we see the new interface. So if you haven't seen the new V2 interface yet, this is what it looks like. And we can migrate our legacy accounts that were created before whatever date V2 support started. What's a few months at this point?
Yeah.
Any legacy accounts you can migrate. It started on the 30th, so it just started up till June 1st, and as of June 1st, all accounts will be migrated. All Google Tag Manager accounts will be migrated to version 2 if you haven't done so already. It's not bad news in any way. There are definite improvements in version 2 of Tag Manager. So we have a container that's set up here for the Google Analytics Test.com website, which we're going to use to test out our tag management. Okay, tags. New tag. First, we're going to just deploy basic page view tagging through Tag Manager. So we're going to call this tag, we'll just call it page view for short now. Let's call it GA page view. Choose product, Google Analytics. So there are templates that are provided for certain common solutions. Google Analytics is available as the first template because it's kind of a natural marriage even though they are independent systems. Google Analytics, choose a tag type, Universal Analytics. Now, we're going to certainly need to populate our property ID from Google Analytics. So if we go into admin, tracking info, tracking code or your property settings, we'll get the Google Analytics UA number, property ID. We're going to plug it in. If we want to enable demographics, you don't have to do that through scripting in Tag Manager. We just click this checkbox, make sure you update your privacy policy as is required. Track type defaults to page view because that is the basic type of hit that we send to Google Analytics. Continue. Fire on. Now, if you've done rule configuration in version 1, you'll see that rules are much simpler in Google Tag Manager. Version 2. We're going to go ahead and click all pages, and we're going to go ahead and create tag, and we are going to since we have a container that's already deployed to our test page, we've already put the container code on that test page. What we're going to do in Tag Manager is go to Preview. And we see that we are now previewing version 1. And if we load our page, so here we see with the debugger running, the GA page view tag was fired on this page, and we are going to go to the real-time reports, as Adam mentioned in the first session, and we're going to check out the real-time content. We have our active page indicated there. And by the way, as a side note, real-time reports can be very, very useful for testing, event tracking, testing page tracking for in your own deployments. But if you're dealing with a lot of people who are, a lot of visitors who are accessing your site, you may not easily be able to distinguish your own visit. You can always go ahead and put in just a domain name value pair that no one else is going to be using. Your page should still load fine. And then when you go into Tag Manager, there's a new page view coming in, and we should see the URL update. So that's a technique that you can use. And also, once you click into a selection in one of the real-time reports, notice something really interesting that happens. The real-time reports become filtered. So then when you're navigating to other real-time reports, everyone see the blue filter on the top? That it was filtered for the page that we just loaded through Google Tag Manager.
I would say what you will notice is, doing that the first time takes, a little while, and you're going to try it maybe a couple of times. But once you've done a couple of implementation, like you do this very, very quickly, and it's super easy to do the testing. It shortens the time for deployment. Like, it's amazing. Much better approach. One of the trick also you can use is, because if you send the data into your regular web property, you're basically polluting your data with test data. So through Google Tag Manager, I don't know if you're going to cover that, but it's a little bit more advanced. But the UA number that you put, it can actually be a variable, and that variable can depend on whether you're in debug mode or not, in preview mode of GTM. So if you're in preview mode, you send it to a different web property that is only for testing purposes. And if you're not in preview mode, you send it to the real web property.
Right, exactly. So we went into variables, and if you go and create a constant string, you can create a constant string for your UA number. So let's call this UA number.
Also, you will notice when you create the tags, it always asks at the end for the UA number to put. So instead, use a variable to do it. So you change it in only one place.
Let's go ahead and create that.
So is real-time really real-time? Because sometimes when I'm testing, I don't see my hit right away, but I see it like after a while, and then I'm not sure anymore.
It's supposed to be 4 seconds.
Okay. And
Not in the standard reports. Real standard reports is the delay,
Sure.
but real time is supposed to be 4 seconds.
and Android is like 30. So I heard like iOS is 2 minutes and Android is 30.
Oh, on the add-in.
Yes, because it doesn't send the data every single time. It kind of buffers the data and then send it at once. So there might be a longer delay.
Okay, so we have deployed a basic page view tag. Let's deploy a tag to track. We have 3 sample tags here, a link to a zip file. So above we have the HTML on how the HTML would look. Link to a PDF and an offsite link. And offsite links usually begin with HTTP. It's not best practice to use HTTP. The protocol for your own site, move between production development environment, could be a bad scene with that. So usually when you have HTTP, it indicates that you're linking offsite. So let's say that we want to track events for all PDF links. And again, a PDF link is not going to be tracked by default because it does not contain the Google Analytics track code. So it's a prime candidate for event tracking or virtual page view tracking. So if we go back into Google Tag Manager, we're going to go to New Tab, Google Analytics, Universal Analytics. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and use Stefan's suggestion of, did we save UA number? There we go, UA number. So we saved that as a macro, so we can use this in all of our event tags. We can use that in page
You should say
tags.
variable, version 2 it's variable.
Oh, variable, you're sorry.
Yeah, that's the thing. We get used to V1 and using triggers and macros and so on, and then, oh, geez, we have to kind of relearn the language of the new version.
Right, macro equals trigger, macro equals variable, and rule equals trigger. So
Yes.
sorry that I'm mixing those up. Track type is going to be event. Category, action, label properties that we populate into an event. Now, with Google Tag Manager, we can take advantage of hard coding when it's appropriate, and we can take advantage of using variables where variables are appropriate. So consistency where we need it, controlled variability where we need that. So for a PDF link, let's say our category is going to be link. Let's say our action is going to be PDF. Label, we want to dynamically pull in the name of the file that we're linking to. How are we going to do that? We're going to one thing, let's back up. One thing we forgot to do. Let's go back to triggers. We're going to discard these changes for now. We're going to go back to variables. And we are going to enable the click URL was actually already enabled. If you're doing this exercise, and by the way, we're going to have a demo on this very, very soon. One thing that we will mention in the demo is that the click URL variable is not enabled by default. Only the other ones that you see in green are enabled by default. So make sure you go into variables and enable click URL, and you'll have access to that variable when you're setting up your tags. So let's.
Yeah, since a lot of you are using version 1 right now, one of the things you will notice is when you move from version 1 to version 2, most of the macros that you had in version 1 are going to come up as custom variables under V2. And you might actually end up with the same name for the variables. That's one of the things that you need to watch for. It's still going to work. It won't be a problem. It's just that, let's say the click URL is one of the out-of-the-box variable, but if you happen to have a macro with the same name, when you switch from V1 to V2, it's going to keep that name. So you will have twice the same variable name. You need to, ideally want to do a cleanup of that. But it's still going to work, no worries.
Thank you, Stefan. Okay, we enabled click URL, so we have click URL that is available as our label. We're going to go to continue. Fire on. So now we are configuring our trigger. We're going to go ahead and click as the trigger event. Configure trigger, some clicks, and we're going to go ahead and use our macro. We're not only using our macro to populate the tag, but we're using our we're using our variable, our click URL variable, also as the trigger for the tag firing. So we're going to say click URL ends with .pdf. Let's call this PDF as the trigger. Pretty straightforward. Go ahead and save the trigger. Create tag. Let's call this PDF tracker. Go ahead and save that. Let's refresh our preview of the container. Let's make sure that's refreshed. Okay, we're going back to our test page. We're going to reload the page. Now we should see the main page view tag that has fired, and the PDF tracker that has not fired yet. Let's keep our fingers crossed. Let's go ahead and click catalog. This just goes to a dummy page. Let's go and check out the events report, and there we go. So there's our event that's been populated through Google Tag Manager. So that is a lot better than configuring little piece of scripts for 20 or 30 or 100 different PDFs on your site. Anything else that we want to say about this approach, Stefan?
How many of you are responsible for deploying across several websites? Yeah, a few of you. Okay. So one of the tricks also is once you have a container with the features that you want to track, all of the tracking requirements, like, yeah, we want to track downloads and outbound links and page views and such events, video events and stuff like that. Once you have a container that has all the configuration that you want, if you need to deploy to a different website, you can either use the same container, which would be one approach, but there's caveats to that, or you can export and import the containers, which means that once you have a good practice in place in terms of what you want to track and how it's going to be tracked and so on, you're going to be able to kind of reuse your implementation over and over and over again. A lot easier than it used to be.
So quick question, is if you actually want to track across the boundary, like in China, because we have actually servers in the United States and want to track the server in China.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you do that? Because Google Analytics is not that popular in China.
Yeah, and isn't Google Tag Manager limited in China also? So the question is, what if you want to use GA or GTM across boundaries in China? But I think, well, first, GA is somewhat limited in China, right?
Right, right.
And I think GTM isn't it blocked? I think it's blocked.
Yeah, it's
Yeah. So that would be one of the limitations. But if you, I've seen cases where you have a global organization with websites per country, for example. So if the measurement strategy is to use exactly the same tracking across all of the websites, then in theory you could be using just one container and through different rules fire the right tag or sending the right data to the right UA number depending on which country is being used. Or you could decide to use different containers, but then you export and import the containers, so at least you have the same functionality across all of those websites. But for China, I think it would be like a specific case that you could take offline. Yeah.
Stefan, I have a question for you kind of in that regard. Have you heard much more about being able to kind of replicate container configurations through the API, which is supposed to be?
So if you have a very, very large scale implementation, like hundreds of websites, you don't want to import, export, or export once and import like 100 times. Doesn't make sense, right? So there's a management API for Google Tag Manager. So through the API, you can actually manage pretty much every individual functionality of GTM. You can manage it through an API. So I've seen cases where instead of using GTM, the interface, the API is being used, and a special set of tools are being developed to basically say, okay, we're gonna change this tag, and boom, make the change across hundreds of websites. It's possible. It's much more advanced.
And that is new for version 2.
It was available in version 1. The management API was available in version 1. I don't think the API is changing between the two versions. What is changing is the interface, the user interface, but the API itself is still pretty much the same. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, this is what we're going through today is pretty tactical. We want to keep, especially for larger deployments, we want to keep bigger best practices in mind as well.
Yeah, I would say, if you reach that point, you better call someone like Enor to help you out, because you won't get it right the first time, that's for sure.
Okay, thank you, Stefan. This is good, but we see that You may have already seen though that there is a little bit of, we haven't gone kind of the whole way in getting things as automated as we could. And that's because as great as it is to track all of our PDFs with one tag, what's the problem? We're just tracking PDFs, and there are other types of outbound links, other types of event tracking that we may want to configure. So now we're going to look at another approach. We're going to go ahead and get rid of this PDF tracker. Delete.
So notice that even if he's deleting here, so far I don't think you've
I haven't
published
published
anything.
yet, yeah.
So it's all of the changes that he's making, it's only visible to him. So you can actually, when you're in preview mode, you can do all of your tests and nobody else is being impacted. And when you delete a tag, it's only deleted in your own environment until you actually do the publish, and then the change is deployed. And you get the full track record, the history of what has been changed.
Yes, every change that you make isn't live until you actually publish the container, which we actually haven't done. This is just testing through debug mode, which is a neat feature within Tag Manager. Also a little bit easier to get to, just a little bit in version 2. But let's go back to the issue of the fact that we're only tracking one type of link now, and that's a PDF link. We're going to go ahead and look at the concept of the data layer, and we're going to talk a little bit more about variables as well. So the data layer, as we mentioned, is a way, it's kind of a repository that you can include on your pages to store data that your Google Analytics tags, or really any tags in Google Tag Manager, can read from. So we're going to start by taking a script. Where's Ahmed Awad? Raise your hand. So this is a script that was written by my colleague Ahmed Awad. This is a script that is going to populate the data layer for variables for different types of links, such as PDFs, offsite links. This script, we will make this script available at the same time that this demo, kind of what we're doing today, will be made available. So everyone will have access to the script. No one has to go in and spend a weekend or a year writing this. So we're going to go ahead and copy this.
So here you have a classic example. My session in the eMetrics was about tag management, and you have an example of, yeah, sure, if the only thing you want to track is page views and usual events, you don't need to know any JavaScript. But the day you have to do something more sophisticated, you might actually, even if you pick the script, maybe you're going to want to understand what it's doing, right, before slapping anything on your website. So
Yeah.
knowledge of JavaScript is still important because your requirements most likely are not that simple. If everyone's website was the same and everyone's implementation was the same, yeah, sure. But we all have exceptions to track, yeah.
I could not agree more, and that's actually one of the actions at the end of the deck. As we're going through these exercises, if you're saying to yourself, you know what, this would probably be even clearer if I understood HTML. Go to Code Academy, spend 2 or 3 hours, learn HTML. It's not rocket science. If you're in this world, invest in your own education and learn some of this stuff, especially if you're going to be really responsible, or really working with tag management and really doing more with tag management than just one tag a year. Go ahead and learn HTML. And as an extension of that, JavaScript is more complex than HTML, but sometimes it's enough just to look at a script and know what's going on instead of it just being a big blur. So I couldn't agree more with that.
Yeah, there's a question here.
Quick question. Is there a benefit to me of using Google Tag Manager to put in JavaScript there as opposed to other places on the page? Is there a performance benefit to doing it?
There's no performance impact of using Google Tag Manager. If there's something, it's going to be better, right? The administration of your tags is going to be much simpler. So Google Tag Manager itself itself is loaded asynchronously on the page. So what it means is basically users come first, right? So the user interface is processed first, and as soon as possible, the browser is going to handle the GTM bootstrap, the starting code. And from that point on, it's going to fire the other tags based on the rules and everything, but it's always the user first. So it's actually a much better approach to tag management. And we're talking about Google Analytics, of course, but through GTM, as you mentioned earlier, through GTM, you can manage all of your marketing tags. And oftentimes, marketing tags are loaded, in the head of the page, and they are synchronous, which means basically that the page literally stops loading until that little piece of code or image or whatever is loaded. And you don't really want to have that. You want your users to have priority over your tracking. There's no value in tracking something if the user can't use the site, right? Because it's too slow. So I wouldn't do any implementation going forward. In fact, I've refused to work with a client who didn't want to use GTM to do a new deployment. Like, if you are going to deploy GA or UA, do it with GTM or another tag manager, but ideally do it with GTM. Don't do it the old-fashioned of coding everything in the page. That's not the right way to do it anymore.
Absolutely. It's kind of I looked at it kind of as a quiet revolution almost. It's like one day, I think a lot of people woke up and said, we really need to use tag management just because it makes sense.
Yeah.
It makes sense all around.
Not only because the code is going to be easier and all that stuff, but it's also all of the workflow, the testing, the track record of the changes, user control, like controlling who has access to Tag Manager, who can create new tags, who can deploy those tags. Because you could have someone creating the tag and someone else approving it before it goes live. Right? So there's a whole bunch of benefits to use GTM beyond the fact of making page views and events easier. Right?
Okay, let's go back to our script. So we're copying the script, and we're going to paste this script in as its own tag. And for this tag, we're going to use custom HTML. And custom HTML is the catch-all tag for all tags that don't have templates. You're going to use a custom HTML tag a lot in Google Tag Manager. It almost should be renamed kind of catch-all tag or generic tag. And it's really not about HTML, it's really about JavaScript. So custom HTML is going to be our friend. We're going to go ahead and paste in that data layer script, and just since we're on here, talking about being able to parse out a little bit of JavaScript and not being intimidated by it. So here we can see, even if you, let me stay here. Even if you're not super familiar with JavaScript, you can see what's getting pushed into the data layer. So we're populating the special event slot in the data layer, and we're populating we're calling it event cat. That's what we're using for event category, event action, and event label. So we're going to use those variables. We're going to use those, they're not variables yet in Tag Manager. We're going to use those name value pairs that have been populated into the data layer, and we're going to pull those out of the data layer through Google Tag Manager. But this tag still needs to have a trigger associated with it. All tags have to have triggers. So we're going to go ahead and continue, and we're going to go to more, and we're going to go to new, and we are going to go to custom event, and the name of this event is GTM DOM. That means that the document object model has loaded. That basically means that all of the HTML and JavaScript on the page has at least been parsed, even if there are things that are downloading in the background. GTM DOM. You may be asking yourself, is there an easy way to know this? How do you know this? You know this because you're attending a session like this. There's nothing super intuitive about this. You just have to know it. This is easier than a lot of previous triggers in Google Tag Manager version 1, but we're specialists because we have some specialized knowledge. Now we know this. All this will be encoded in the demo going forward as well, but you just have to know that for the script, you need to add GTM DOM as the event name for the trigger. So we're going to go ahead and save the trigger, call this DOM loaded.
One way to view that GTM DOM thing, it's basically the signal that the user can interact with the page. As long as this special event is not fired, is not available, it means there's still important stuff being loaded. When GTM DOM is available, it means, okay, now you can proceed because all the important components of the page are loaded.
That's a better way of looking at it, that the user can start interacting with the page. We're going to go ahead and create this tag. We're just going to call this data layer populator.
One of the comments I've heard also is that once you have tag management in place, like GTM, you can basically inject anything on the page. So you could inject something like JavaScript alert, hey, I'm here, and suddenly you would see pop-up message going on the side and saying, hey, I'm here. So you have to be careful in what you're doing because you can basically break the site. And that's one of the pushback that we hear the most often from clients is that, well, but if I give control to my marketing people who don't have a clue about JavaScript, they can break the site. Well, yes, that's true. That's why you want to have people who know how to do it.
Yeah, that container really is an open window.
It's very powerful.
Yeah, it's very powerful. Okay, we've populated the data layer with one tag, and now we're going to create a single event tag that will generate events for all of the different link scenarios, such as PDFs or offsite links or zip files or PowerPoint files. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to create a new tag, Google Analytics, Universal Analytics, Tracking ID. We're going to take advantage of our variable that we configured at Stefan's behest. Event. Now, event category, action, and label. We're going to go ahead and read the variables. And remember, we populated event category and action and label into the data layer. We're going to go ahead and read those in now. So we're going to create new variables. And it's going to be a data layer variable. And the name of the data layer variable for event category, as we remember, was just event cat. Name will be category. Just do this quickly. Scroll up. Going to create another new variable for event action. Data layer variable. Call this action event. This could be whatever we populated the data layer as. This name, it does not relate directly to Google Analytics. This is however we populated the data layer, but we're using a similar naming convention.
I think it's also worth mentioning, when you think of your measurement strategy, you're going to look at, okay, what are the business objectives, what should be tracked on the website, how it's going to be tracked, and so on. Think ahead, because if you don't have a good taxonomy in mind, you might end up with a ton of variables, and you need to have a way to make sense of all of those names that you're going to use, right? So you want to plan ahead how your measurement is going to be implemented on the website, and think of what are going to be the event names and categories and variables that you're going to use. Even the name of the container, if you work on a large environment, you might end up having multiple containers. So you want to have a naming convention so that you can find your way around all of those tags and other stuff. Right?
Absolutely. A big part of analytics is just staying organized. Basic organization and consistency. That's another great example. Okay, now we're going to continue. We have our 3 data layer variables that we've created. Now for firing on, we're going to go to More, New. We're going to go to Custom Event. And when we populate an event value into our data layer, we can use that as a custom event in Google Tag Manager. So we are going to use the event tracker variable that we used, event tracker. Let's go ahead and name this event tracker. Let's go ahead and save. Look good? Okay.
If it's not good, you're gonna know.
If it's not good, we're going to find out right now. So we're going to go ahead and
And the
create.
beauty of it is, if it's not good, you can test it, you can come back, fix it, test again, until you're satisfied or too tired.
Okay, let's go.
So you don't need like the click listener and all that stuff?
No more. You don't need click. You don't need to create a separate click listener anymore. You know, that's a big plus. We're going to go ahead and refresh this page. Okay. Let's go ahead and refresh our test page. Let's see which tags have loaded and haven't loaded. So we see that the data layer is populated already. As soon as the GTM DOM was completed, we populated the data layer. We have our GA page view. We have our event auto tracker. Let's keep our fingers crossed. Let's try out PDF first. Let's go into, there's our event.
That was quick.
Yep, so that was quick. Let's go back and let's go to the Enor blog, beginning with HTTP. Oh, let me get rid of, so there we go, outbound links. So that populated correctly. And let's download the resources.zip file. And there we go, assets.zip. So, as Stefan was pointing out, the first time you go through this, obviously, the first time I was doing event tracking, I deployed my Google page view tag, and I broke all the events on the site because I didn't realize that I had to update my events as well. So, obviously, we've been doing this a little while. It's going to take a little bit of learning to get to the point where Google Tag Manager will be quicker. But going forward, for anything beyond a very, very small tagging practice, Google Tag Manager will benefit you in the long run. So let's just look at some closing thoughts. Oh, those are the closing thoughts. Oh, I guess we skipped over some slides, but that's okay because we are over time. I'm Eric Fettman, analytics instructor and coach, not graphic designer at Enor. Stefan, where could folks connect with you?
Yeah, you can, well, if you search for me, search for Stefan Amel, and you will see the guy with the red shirt. That's me. There's, for those interested also, there's a Google Plus. There are 2 communities that are pretty interesting. One is for GA, and the other one is for GTM. So if you are on Google Plus, just search for GA or GTM, and you will find it's like the GA community has over 100,000 users. It's a user-driven community, so people ask questions, other people answer. So a lot of people there can easily find out.
And on that note, while you have resources like Stefan here, we also have many members of the Enor tech team. These are their techniques that I'm showing you. When I have tech questions, they're the people I go to. So we'll be around. We'll be at the cafe tables outside. So it's really a pretty unique opportunity. If you have questions, now is the time to ask when you have the experts in the room. If you'd like to join Enor for training, I'll be doing training in San Francisco May 6th to 8th. A few people from the previous training. Hello to Jocelyn, hello to Pam. I think, is that Rosemary back there? Hello to Rosemary, and I don't know if I missed anyone else, but very nice to see you here. Stefan, do you have any engagements coming up?
Not specifically, but my advice would be that if your day job, if your responsibility is not to do actual implementation, seek for help. Don't try to do it all on yourself. It's a discipline in itself. The requirements are increasing, and typically when you use tag management, it's also because the expectations of what you're going to be able to track and analyze are also increasing. Seek for help, go for training, yes, go on G Plus communities and stuff like that, but if your area of expertise is more to do analysis, understand the business, recommendations, and those things, I would say, go for that. That's your expertise. If you are in the technical aspects and your responsibility is to do the implementation, yes, you absolutely need to take some training. You will save a ton of time, and the quality of what you're going to do is going to be much better. You're going to basically leapfrog all of the trouble that we went through.
Yeah, a lot of this is just about getting further quicker and avoiding a lot of the pain. So thank you everyone for your attention. Thank you previous training attendees, clients and client training folks. Great to see you here. Thank you to the eNOR team for all of this great knowledge transfer, and a really special thank you to Stefano. It's a great pleasure and a surprise to have him here with us today. So
No problem.